So that preparation is really, really important, and it's actually a cycle of about 25 years where obviously it's hard because you're juggling kids, you're juggling school, you're juggling life, holidays and stuff like that, but you're still trying to make sure you're saving enough for later. And that's that preparation stage. And then there's that retirement stage that you come into where your passive income is going great, and your active income is a little bit scary, but it's okay, it's up there. How do you balance this? To give you an idea of averages in Australia, you've got 1 in 6 people, which we've done this in 7 different ways. We've had it in this way because it was just the best, but boy, it was tricky. 1 in 6 people own an investment property. 1 investment property. 1 in 50 own 2. 1 in 200 own 3, and then 4, and then here we go. So I think you've got to work out where you are in your accumulation, in your preparation stage, how many properties do you want to have under your belt in terms of having passive income that you can later on use in life and live well when the active income starts to sort of slow down a little bit. And you know what, I'm proud of anyone that looks after themselves, later in life. I think it's great to have that financial freedom. And every single, whether you're 1 in 6, 1 in 50, 1 in 200, I just wanted to give that a reference because everyone's different and everyone's passion is different. So I think working out that where you want to sit and how you accumulate that is really important. Some of the speakers tonight are great mortgage brokers, accountants. They are the guys that can actually step you on that path because often it's inches, things that you're doing along the way that make it different to this grand plan. It's great to see the grand plan, but you don't really understand how it actually starts, where it starts, but it starts with good advice from good people. So a great accountant, a great solicitor. A big thing that we're talking about at the moment, how is that? A big thing that people are really concerned with and a little bit grim about at the moment is the property market. People, if it bleeds, it reads, so meetings having a war at the moment, and people are very short term. People do not think generational wealth, they think the next year, next month, and the next week. They think quite short term. So we're being absolutely pounded at the moment by the media and the industry as well. We're getting clients coming back to us saying, are we going to be okay? Is everything all right? This is a great graph of the cycle of life and property. The answer is yes, it's going to be fine. The answer is what? Okay. Sorry guys, I'll do it without the mic. So basically, we've dealt with 3 really good firms in the marketplace. When you're looking at things like this, that was just after World War II. Over here, we had recession, and straight after that, we had great old times. Right now, we've got the COVID-19 straight after that. So I really want everyone just to remember when they're thinking about investing property, when they're watching stuff in the media, this is all growth. This is not what property prices have done, it's all growth. Every time the market corrects, it corrects probably about 5 to 10, 15%. So you're going to see the correction a couple of times. You'll see the correction here, it's a negative correction. You'll see the correction after this nice boom. Then you'll see the correction come back, and it always sits about 5 to 10%. So our estimate from the last 3 times of what's happened in the marketplace with really nice booms, you will normally see about a 5 or 10% correction market, which we've probably witnessed already. This is a big question that we're getting asked at the moment. Another thing people are worried about is if they're too late or if it's how to do that. awesome. I have that. Is it too late and are you too old? So this is a big one for people because I'm often talking to people that their kids are a little bit older, they don't think they have an opportunity. We always say, definitely not. Colonel Sanders started his business when he was 62 years of age. So it's any good time, it's good to get into property. Over a 10-year cycle, typically it'll double and you made your money. So it looks good between 55 to 65. Between 65 to 75, from 75 to 85, it doesn't look good. But anyway, the younger years keep going, it's never too late. Most asked question also, where to get this helping the kids. How the hell do we help the kids with what the prices have done? That's crazy. A lot of people tonight have been fueled and motivated to help their kids, and that's why they've come along, they drag the kids along. It's great. The big thing with kids, and it's hard because mum and dad have done well with property, and then when they turn around to the kids go, well, it's good for you, but what about me? You've got to get started. So the stuff that we're seeing is lead by example, expose the kids to conversations about real estate, how you did it, the way you did it, saving, that sort of stuff. Career, obviously they're going to need great, they're going to need an income. Better income, the better, the easier it is for them. Deposit or savings. I do have to say, guys, people don't know, but if you're saving for property, and I've got to tell you this, it's the best kept secret out there that the government offers. Your kids can save, they can put extra money into their super. I'm going to get killed by the accountant here. Because I'm going to get it wrong, but I'm going to give you the gist of it, you'll get it right later. So they're going to pay a little bit more. The kids are going to pay a little bit more for the super. It's not going to attract a tax rate as high as just saving money. So they're going to save it easier by whacking their super. They can take it back out their super to buy. Now, if it's the area above their normal contribution. So it's a way to almost save 20, 30 or 40% faster by using your super. Mum and dad going through all the life, it's always a cracker. They step in, they help, they step out. I just saw someone nod at their son. They step out and little Johnny's okay, he's got the property now, mum and dad pull back. So lead by example, getting a job, getting a great job and deposit. So Australian housing, I wanted this graph earlier, here it is. This is what housing has done. Since 1880, we've started recording stats, and this is what property market looks like. This is going to be available on our website and on our social media, so you can pull all these cards out to prove it to people later. Don't forget, guys, active income, passive income. I really wanted to work on passive income and balancing that. And then the great property cycle, time I'm over. The great property cycle here, if you're wondering where we are on that cycle, it's the same cycle every 10 years. Sometimes it's 14, sometimes it's 7, but the average is 10. That's how it looks. And thanks for listening.
Okay, guys, up next we've got Anthony Nettie from HBO Lawyers. Phenomenal. If you guys are looking for a great lawyer, this guy is the guy. We work with him all the time. I'm not paid to say this, it's not a paid editorial, but phenomenal lawyers. He gets some great advice here.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Mark, for putting on a wonderful evening. I want to take you back to 2015. Now, Mark, you may recall back in 2015, I gave a presentation at your other office about buying off the plan. I think one of the slides coming up shortly. And I was very concerned about people buying off the plan. In fact, I was so concerned I gave the comparison. Buying off the plan is not just like our friend here, Mr. Forrest Gump, who said, life's like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. But I can say since that time, I've calmed down. After 6 years now passed, there have been some changes to legislation, and after many sleepless nights, a few bottles of whiskey, I have calmed down, and I can now say with some confidence that some of the risk of buying off the plan is now gone. Now, there's been 3 lots of legislation that have been passed since then that I'm going to talk you through to explain why I think buying off the plan now is not a bad proposition. Now, the first one relates to sunset dates. Now, are we familiar generally with how a sunset date works? No. Okay, so when you're buying off the plan, like that's the one across the road, the settlement will come once the building is essentially done. So what we saw was there were a few, perhaps, opportunistic developers who worked out that if we simply slow down the building and get over that sunset date for these residential type developments, then perhaps we can rescind those contracts. So you can imagine there's mums and dads, families, first-home buyers waiting 1, 2, 3 years for these developments to be finished, and the developer then says, sorry, I'm now going to rescind the contract, we're in a rising market, and I'm perhaps going to resell that property for a higher amount. But there was really nothing you could do about that, and that was a terrible, terrible outcome. However, since then, new legislation has been introduced that says, naughty developers, you can't do that anymore on residential sites. If you want to rescind under a sunset clause, you either need the consent of the buyer, or you need to go to the court and demonstrate why it is just and equitable for the court to make that order for the contract to be rescinded. And the court now even has the authority to impose compensation to those buyers that have rightfully missed out. So the second lot of legislation that has come in, that the builders probably not happy about, but again, protection for mums and dads buying their first off the plan, relates to bonds. Now, the Home Building Act says that if a building is greater than 3 stories, like that one there, then there is no requirement at all for the builder to provide any homeowner's warranty for what they're building. So greater than 3 stories, including basement, no homeowner's warranty. What that means is that if we see that building after completion having problems with cladding or anything else, then you're relying on the statutory warranty for the builder to come back and the developer to come back and fix those buildings. Now, as we've seen, there have been a number of buildings and developers and builders who have gone under, and those builders and developers aren't always forthcoming and coming back, and they simply wind up their company. And what that means is the mums and dads, the investors, the first-time buyers are all there picking up the pieces. So they've introduced a new requirement, and now it's a starting point, and it doesn't go far enough, but the new requirement is that the developers must now deposit 2% of the building contract price into a security fund that's held by the Department of Fair Trading. And this idea of this 2% is to give an incentive to the builder to come back and fix those problems in these residential buildings. Now, again, it's a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, 2%, but it's a starting point. And what would happen is the builder, the developer arranges an inspection by a suitably qualified person that's not his mate or someone down the road, but someone that's approved and agreed to by the Australian managers. They come back and they inspect the property around the 15-month mark, identify defects or defects, and then the builder then has the opportunity to come back and fix those defects. And provided there's no defects remaining, those 2% funds are refunded to the builder, to the developer. As I said, 2% doesn't go very far, and unfortunately we've seen a number of buildings lately in the Sydney area where there have been substantial defects after 2 or 3 years, and everyone's just scratching their heads. Look, at times it wasn't the builder's fault, there has been some change in legislation which was unclear, but other times, unfortunately, you're dealing with developers who don't have the same moral standing to ensure that they build something that's well built. So one of the main advice that I give our clients is to do your due diligence, put the contract aside for a moment and look at who are you contracting with, what is their reputation. If you talk to real estate agents, they're on the front line, they know who's building well and who's not building well. And if you're happy to do so, go and knock on doors, go and speak to people in the building blocks and say, hey, what was your experience like with this developer and this builder? When you completed, did they come back and fix defects? What was your attitude towards fixing things? Are you overall happy with what you got? So, important due diligence, understand who you're buying from, put aside your contract for the moment. Now, my third point relates to the contract. Now, as a solicitor who's actually for some developers in the past, I don't think we have got any here today, so I can give away a few of their secrets. Now, we were asked to produce contracts that were flexible, produce contracts that gave the developer the opportunity to make changes that were desirable to them, not so much desirable to the purchaser. And the framework of that contract allowed that to happen. Now, the agents would be presented with a floor plan or the showroom, and they would show these happy, excited buyers what they're going to receive. But the contract would say you can't rely on anything outside the contract. So buyers then left not knowing exactly where they stand. And often we would put clauses in that weren't entirely clear as to what they meant. And that also gave us the flexibility to then make changes favourable to the developer, but not also always favourable to the homeowner. And an example of the clause would be a fairly well accepted 5% variation. So a developer can make a change of up to 5% and the buyer has to live with it. So that sounds fairly harmless. So you go and buy a unit. I mean, that's actually a very good comment. Right? Let's point to that one. You go and buy a unit that you think is going to be 100 square metres and you're left with 95 square metres. So that's within the 5%, but that's okay. But, well, that's right. There could be a hole in the middle of your room. They could reduce your balcony size from a lovely 20 square metre balcony to 5 square metres because they needed that space for something else. They could take that 5% off one bedroom. So you can imagine a 95 square metre unit, you're probably getting 3. No, large 2 or a small 3. What are you doing? 2? 1 is 3. Okay, so you think we just bring that up? Lovely third bedroom. And what they do is they take that 5 square metres off the 5th bedroom and that, or 3rd bedroom, and that 3rd bedroom now is nothing more than a study room. Well, sorry, buyer, the contract allowed for that discretion. So since 2019, there have now been additional requirements for developers to disclose exactly what they're doing. And this disclosure includes a floor plan, the fixtures, the fittings, any easements, any right of way, anything that's going to affect what you're buying. Now, further, if there's going to be any change from that, what you've received, what you think you're bargaining for, then they must notify you. And if they notify you, you think, hang on a minute, I didn't bargain to buy that, and had I known you're going to go put that big pole right on my balcony in front of my door, then I wouldn't have bought the property. And then as a result, you may have the right to rescind the contracts, or you may have taken us for a reduction in price. Now, previously, buyers did not have this power, but it's now about making the developers more accountable for what they're doing, which I think is again a step in the right direction. Okay, so we're not trying to set you off the plan, by the way. I just thought this would be a relevant discussion. Mark doesn't currently. We're not going to. So do your homework. So, do your homework, do your due diligence, understand who you're buying from, and make sure the solicitor is up to speed with the rules and regulations and does a thorough job in reviewing the contract. Now, the last sort of changes that I referred to back in 2019 also now give buyers more time. The cooling off period is extended to 10 days. They've given buyers more time to complete. It's 14, now it's 21 days. And they've also tightened up some of the provisions, all aimed at helping the buyer. So, buying off the plan, yes, it has its risks, but it also has its benefits. Now, we've had a very good, that graph that showed before, we've had a very, very good period lead up till now. So, anyone who bought off the plan, they benefited from the time from which they exchanged to the time in which they settled there was growth. And they made money simply by having their name on that contract. So, that is one of the advantages. You've got time to save up money. Be mindful though that stamp duty is payable 15 months from date of exchange if it's a principal place of residence, or 3 months from date of exchange if it's an investment. So although you may have a 2-year settlement, you'll have to allow to pay stamp duty unless you want to give the Revenue Office a bit of interest, but I think they're making enough money. So that is one benefit. Now the other benefit is you've got a new product. You know, assuming Mark that if you've got a rental market that's flooded, your tenants will navigate towards the new product over an older product. And a dryer and a dishwasher. That's right. There's tax benefits, there's depreciation benefits that we may hear from some of the other speakers. And there's a certainty that if the building has been built well, there's a certainty as to where you're going with Australian levies. Now, some of the risks of buying second-hand things that we're seeing are unexpected bylaws, unexpected special levies. So they found out that the building doesn't comply with fire. So 20 grand special levy for fire. Or there's concrete cancer. Unfortunately, some of my Italian predecessors back in the 1960s and 70s were building things that now have concrete cancer. So you avoid a lot of these things with new builds, provided that they're built by a good and reputable builder. There's grants, the government's throwing money away. I'm not sure if those grants for new builds, due to the caps that we would see that here. I mean, the grants that you see, price is probably above the grant threshold. Labor's changing, good. Okay, well, I'll come back to the next talk about that. Okay, we'll talk about politics the next occasion. So definitely a number of benefits in buying off the plan. So all I can say is that if your appetite is for a box of chocolates, then make sure you do your homework so that you do end up with a box of Gillian or Ferrero Rocher and not that Turkish delight. It's the end of the favourites, so do your homework well. We've seen, we asked people, we do see a little of the plan, but it is slowing down. It is slowing down. The demand and the appetite for the plan is slowing down. Thank you.
Really, life advice as well, then is very good. Often life, L-I-F-E, yeah, it's very good, like, it's very humbling.
All right, guys, next up we've got the accountant for the night. We've got Harry from Rose of Kent. So I think there's going to be a lot of questions for you after this. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you on putting on such a great night. Days like this, that it's great to see people out there and that not only understand that you can't work forever, you need some kind of passive income to keep going. So, just a question out there: does anyone know the wealthiest person in the room tonight? Anthony Beatty. Just this beautiful young baby right here. It's all about timing, right? So I've always been told that you should try and buy a property before you turn 25. So the matter. So if you buy a property before 25, I think you can use that growth to generate more income. I will talk about property and tax, but I did want to talk about a few things first. Otherwise, everyone will start walking out the door. So I specialise in property and tax, and I advise families with net worth of upwards of $30 million. We see a lot of wealth created in certain areas. Structuring is important. So, what structure are you buying your property in, right? So, if you're an individual on a salary of $80,000 or $100,000, is buying a property in your name the best thing for you? You might look at buying it in a trust where you can generate income through the trust and spread income out to family members and pay less tax that way. So don't think that you need to buy property in your own name is the best way to go about it. To generate wealth, don't be afraid. If the bank's giving you money, you should take it. If they're not giving you money, you should be afraid. That's the way I see it. Be surrounded by people that you trust and understand. You don't need to be earning $100,000 a year to buy a property. I've seen people earning $70,000 a year create property portfolios for $2 million plus. So you don't need to be on a high income to generate wealth. You just need a good real estate agent, a good lawyer, and hopefully a good accountant. Some areas on property and tax. So for the 30th of June, there's a lot of things you can do if you're owning investment property. So one thing, firstly, interest prepayment, right? So if you can prepay interest for the next 12 months, you can lock in an interest rate, you get that tax deduction now, you lodge your tax return in July, August, you get the benefit of the immediate payment. Other areas are repairs. You should speak to your real estate agent and see, what repairs can I do on my property, right? You don't want to call from your real estate agent in July, August, saying that, there's a leakage in the bathroom, and you call it up, and it's going to be, you go to the next financial year, 23 financial year, you want your money back for 12 months. Depreciation. So this is a huge area where I see people think that they buy a unit for 70,000, built in 1970. They think that they can get any depreciation on it. You actually can. Depreciation on the fixtures and fittings, depreciation on the building. So if you go home tonight and check your tax return and see that there's no depreciation claimed on that tax return, you haven't missed the boat. What you can do is you've got 2 years from your notice of assessment to go back and claim that depreciation in the last 2 years. So speak to a good quantity surveyor. I can give you a recommendation if you need one. And you know, depreciation is a great tax deduction because you're not actually paying any cash for it. It's a non-cash deduction where you've made the investment and then you're getting a deduction as you go through the life of the property until you sell it. So they're the key areas. Now, I want to talk about property and superannuation as well. So a lot of people think that their superannuation fund is in a bank, ANZ or CBA, and look at what the rate is. What the rate is. It's only 1%, 2%. Is that the best place for your superannuation? What you can do is, husband and wife, what they do is they can merge their superannuation portfolios in a self-managed super fund, and then they can buy an investment property they want. The key thing is you can't live in your property, in that superannuation, in that property you buy. So you can't buy the penthouse in Manly in your fund and say, I want to live in the penthouse. Costs an in-house asset, right? So a lot of people buy commercial properties for their super fund. Thank you. If you're a business, you can have the super fund buy the property and then rent out that. So that's the way a lot of people do things. If your super fund's not earning money, look at merging your fund as a husband and wife, or even as a family. If you've got kids, you could merge it all together and then treat it as a family fund and help people buy property. Thank you.
Are you seeing a lot of superannuation purchases? And can they get, it's not just up, does it have to be related, or they could be friends or family?
Yeah, sure. I'm just watching the camera.
So if it's like mum, dad, and daughter and son-in-law, they can do that.
Yeah.
They have to do that anyway. Okay, that's great. Yeah, because we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of people coming in, they're buying because they see that money as lazy money. It's like 50 grand, 200 grand. It's getting big, that money now, people go to the supermarket.
So if you put 200,000 together times 2, that's 400,000. So, then you look at buying an investment property in Queensland for $1 million, there's a 10% deposit already. Anyway, but around here as well, anywhere you feel comfortable where the growth is and you've got a good property, that's what's happening. Because the industry funds are okay. It's more the big banks that are not performing for long people. The returns are not as high as industry funds, or if you can manage the fund better, then you should do it.
I think that's nice tonight. Again, not about something that's more about just helping advise and talking on something to do with Queensland real estate because they might have reached you. But the super one's a big one. The super one's a big one because there's a lot of people that can between family and friends. Sorry, between family, it's 100 a year, 200 a year. And don't forget, super can borrow money, residential or commercial.
Okay, next up, Zach from Shaw Financial. So Zach, mortgage broker. I can confidently say, working in real estate, the buyers that we see that get the deals across the line working with brokers, not with banks. I hope I'm not getting in trouble for saying that, but it's true. Because, and you'll be able to explain this better, but brokers obviously go out to a range of banks. Whereas if you're just dealing with your one bank, you've got a little bit less of a chance of getting finance. So you're going to get some good advice here. Thank you, Dad.
This is my pocket. One last. There we go. All right, evening guys. Try to keep this as brief as possible, but I do have a couple of slides that I prepared earlier. Short financial brokerage, 6 years running, got access to over 50 lenders, and we represent you as a process that we represent you in front of banks, and we haven't used a broker. We are ready to hear your interest. Bit of an update, obviously, we've seen the cash rate go up. There's a couple more slides on the general market inflation, but there's been coming 22 years. When it comes to shock, obviously, the rate is pumped that they have a free rate with a lot of things going at the moment. They did warn that 2% increase in the cash rate will equal 15% reduction in real housing prices. But looking at the stats historically, you might hear the biggest fall has been reported 5%. Australia, yes, in the same period, Sydney dropped about 10%, but that was right up to the Royal Commission on the capital side of all the lending. And there are some positives of the data. So that's just a snapshot of the property price index on where that last 5% of the discussion property has been felt. You can see Sydney did quite a bit there on the blue line, but you can see the recovery. And historically, when the rates are risen, so one of the things back from the impact on the property prices, which is positive. So Roy Morgan, he's commented on the mortgage stress levels are increasing. The vast majority of borrowers at the moment, they can handle the rate rise at the Royal Commission to type of banks to actually be able to screen everyone who's going for a mortgage. So there's been a buffer, like 2.5% to 3% applied to everyone's citizen. By the way, if you see anything up here that do freeze over, come and chat to me afterwards and have to explain. So on the left, to that previous statement from Roy Morgan, you can see in red the people who have been extremely at risk of not being able to repay their mortgage, and in the grey, so in the scheme of things, there's nothing really outside of the normal. Obviously, it's all relative, but you can see all those tracks. And I mean, the condition of the market at the moment is completely bolstered by the government budget, which that demonstrates the amount of household savings everyone's accumulated over the last 2 years. 2 years of lockdown, thereabouts, everyone saved crypto, and it's, I think it's a massive over $200 billion in savings, in offset accounts and unstated accounts. So people have cash, let's just go into that. Property definitely right. Bit of a rates update, some boring numbers, they're pretty much identical from purchase price of 500K. I mean, in terms of investing, investment might be interest only part of the rates you might be looking at, because paying interest only, that's completely tax deductible, it's on interest rate payments, a few other things that I would say probably out if you don't agree. But that's one of the many deductions on an investment property, not running off property, investment property. One you do not live in, that is completely tax deductible. So it helps cash flow, especially if you're looking to do things with that property, such as renovating or making improvements. Make not paying for the principal, and you can get to that principal improvement by other strategies, which I'll touch on later. But yeah, the rates have gone up, and the variables are in lockstep with the RBA. But the fixed rates are also increasing in between. So everything is going up. 2 years ago, the best principal and interest rate was still ahead of what it is today for a fixed rate. So everything's normalising. Again, the media set the field day. Take it as you will with the grand side.
So what does this mean every time the rates rise? How much does it impact your mortgage? So let's look at the $1 million floor from the bottom there. It raises 1.25%, it's an extra $164 a month. So, I mean, $164 a month is pretty easy to curb. But that's just a bit of an idea on what it means when the cash rate goes up and how it will impact your mortgage. Obviously, there are government schemes available to help people own property. The most recent being latest Help to Buy. The Help to Buy scheme is a shared ownership where the government takes percentage ownership in the house, and it's basically getting for a whole lot less. So, for those people on lower incomes, you can see the bracket there: 90k cap for singles, 120k for couples, and the government commits to buying up to 30% of the existing home. 40% of new build. So that's an incentive that's driven a lot of interest in the local government. Open to a select segment of the market. More recently, at the release of the budget, the state budget, the option to move away from one-off stamp duty payment is now a consideration that every buyer should think about. Another place. Pretty much, this will work at the same time as the existing concession, so up to $650,000 paying the stamp duty on your first home purchase. But after that, you get discounts, and now that's been extended to up to $1.5 million, and you have the option to not pay that one-off stamp, but you can pay an annual land tax. So you can see on the right-hand side here, the break-even point is from 13 years on that owner up, and then on that investment down the bottom, 4, 5, and 6 years. So it is a good opportunity to improve cash flow and get people into the market sooner, reducing that upfront cost. And that just sort of puts it in a scheme on the annual cost based on property value and where the break-even point is. I guess why we're all here tonight is on the strategic front, how do you invest, what do you do? Or you've got an investment property, what can you do? Talk to your team of trusted advisors. I guess pre-purchase, there are a couple of buyers agents that are tonight. These guys are experts in negotiating properties and working with real estate agents to get you the best deal. Yes, they do charge a fee, but they work harder to actually get you more than what you get. So yeah, talk to your consultants, get your team prepared, see what you're available for. Accountants, lawyers, brokers like yourself, we can all help you understand what your buying capacity is, what's available to you, and where's the best place for your investment. Devise a strategy, so look at the location, demographics, government investment. The local budget is huge in North Beaches, and where there's investment in infrastructure, that's where investment in property usually flourishes. And forward thinking, as Mark said, think about the long-term play, think about that generational growth. How's it going to stack up? Historically, property has been the way to go. Trying to save $100,000, $200,000 in 2, 3, 4, 5 years is impossible in the savings account, but it can be done with property. If you've already got an investment property in areas, there's a list of things that I think you can deduct. There's a host of deductions, investment time against their rental income, so again, maximising the cash flow. Interest rate payments, I touched on before. Property advertising fees, real estate management fees, rents, insurance, cleaning at the end, tenancy, council and water rates, and the list goes on. It's also important if you do renovate, keep track of those costs because they can be used to deduct against capital gains because they are capital improvements. And helping the kids, the most important for them ones in the room, looking at you go down the frame. So she doesn't care. She's shooting at she's that. Well, maybe they will start caring when their parents offer to go as guarantors. So you can go up to 8% on your security as a parent for your child. And that basically means if their income services own the loans for their property and then the amount of security taken out of your own home, you're able to guarantee to the value of what the funds to complete, we might be limited. And obviously, there's a gift of funds, non-refundable cash gift. This is one that is relatively simple through the banks. It's acknowledged by the lenders for the purpose of the purchase of the property, and we have to be on the funding signed off by the parents, and that's a very easy way to help out your kids making that purchase. That's it from me.
Okay, guys, Q&A. We're going to pass over the Q&A. I'm sure there's people in the room that have got questions. To get these guys all in one room is near impossible. You usually pay a lot of money for it, so I've made good use of your time. Someone have a hand up over there. I'm hoping this is going to behave if I walk around with it. Let's see how it goes.
Thanks, Lisa. First, thank you very much. Going back to posting good, and the wine is excellent, and the tacos even better. Just on the guy who spoke, the broker actually, are you finding them start getting more tolerant about the size of the because I know some of them are very sensitive about having under 50 squares or 40 squares, and obviously with my head, a lot of one bedrooms that are on 50 so is that improving or is that still an issue?
You get that back?
Yeah, I got that. Every bank's different. There are banks that have policies that purchase 40 square meters, 50 square meters. It varies in terms of that improvement. We haven't seen any major changes, but it is a policy item in a lot of the so a lot of the managers do it, and some colleagues are doing it for small one bedrooms, two bedrooms.
What I'm going back to, I have to say, banks sometimes just say no, whereas the broker can actually segue you into the right person for it.
So I just wonder, given that the challenge of affording anything is big, the 2 bedrooms, whatever, 50 or 80 squares. The other question was the accountant. If you want to merge your supers and buy a property and put that into a self-managed super fund, can you buy an existing property that you own, or does it have to be a brand new purchase? Can you sort of move it from like an independently owned property into your SMSF?
And for the cracker of a question, like Andrew, now it's something that we wouldn't recommend because every time you sell a property, you've got this transactional costs such as capital gains tax and fixed costs. So it's something you don't really recommend to the clients to do.
Sale,
No. If they just pay capital gains tax in your personal name, which would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oh, so it's your personal place of residence, right?
No. So let's say we own 1 or 2 investment properties.
Yep.
Yep. If we want to move those into an SMSF, is there a tax liability or a tax advance?
It's a tax liability in your personal name, but for the disposing of that asset.
You are actually selling it.
Correct. Yeah, it's best you find a property brand new and yeah.
Thank you. Okay, your question.
This isn't my personal name here. This isn't my personal name here, this property.
Very wealthy man.
And then
Not the
what
whole building.
this owns 68.3. But that's a lot way. But typically like to put it that personal name with the motivation of later transfer it into a super. You don't actually have to pay to get around the stamp duty for commercial property, but not residential. It's an advantage, yeah, for commercial, but not residential. Yeah.
Yes. I think it's for Harry. is around as an individual without dependents, is there any benefit of establishing a trust? Like, what are the triggers for looking at a trust?
It all depends as well on, it depends on the other side of the asset protection as well. So depending on what line of work you run, you know, you get through personally, your assets protected in the trust in some way, and then you know, be more about that. But yeah, depending on what your income is, yeah, there's no, from a tax perspective, if it's positive or negatively geared. So if it's negatively geared, where you've got obviously going to be a negative. Positive.
It's not working. Oh, here we go. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Yep.
So, part of brand new trust, just wondering at what age that we can distribute our 17 million.
So what do you think?
Instead of setting up like this, usually do that through usually accountant.
Yeah, so it can be a possible process. What needs to happen is a statement of advice needs to be written. So it's pretty much like a fact finder, yeah? So I can't really give you advice to say, go tomorrow and set up a self-managed super fund, because I haven't given you a statement of advice. I need to sit down with you and go through goals and objectives and where you want to be and whether it's worthwhile for you, because it's not for everyone. Like if you've got, you know, a small amount of money in super, it may not be beneficial, but if you've got a substantial amount, it could be. So it's not for everyone, but a statement of advice needs to be written for each. It's like a financial planning document.
Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Not having a go at the lawyer, but no one wants to talk. Everyone's fine.
Anyone else? Questions? Did you have something? Go. You're trying to start going? Go. Okay, so guys, we do have some investment
Lisa.
plans for you as well. Come on down. And come on. I know you've always got lots to say. Come on. So guys, we do all the details, the bags that we're going to be giving away as you walk out. So make sure you grab those. As I said, these guys, they're very hard to find. Phenomenal. And where we think things go wrong when we're doing real estate transactions, then people don't get good advice. That's really where we go wrong.
I agree. I think for the privilege to be in front of you. Question is actually around about the buying to the trust. You guys can explain what is the benefit of buying to the trust, and is it possible to transfer the your current property into the building trust?
Anthony can also comment on this. I think everyone just wants to buy their family trust because it sounds good. It's like, oh, I bought my family trust. The problem with that is, you've got minors and kids under 18. There's no point really screening income. Now, they've really changed the rules on trusts in the last year in regards to section 180. What that means is that if you distribute from your family trust to a child, let's say he's over 18 and you distribute $50,000 from the family trust, that cash has to actually follow into that child's bank account. Now, what a lot of people were doing is they were distributing money from the family trust to their kid's name as a book entry, and it wasn't actually following. So the ATO's picked up on that and said, no, we stop that, and the cash has actually followed. But if they're under 18, the maximum you could do, I think, is $416. Not worth it. But to answer the question, the transfer from your personal name to a trust, again, anytime you dispose of an asset, you've got transactional costs, capital gains tax. So the ATO won't allow you to And that's sent from one entity to another without capital gains tax. So there's really no benefit in doing that because you're going to be stung with CGT. Unless it's pre-85, depending on when you bought the property. Anthony, do you want to comment on that?
I want to make a comment as well after.
Just taking off my property lawyer hat for a moment, putting on my family law hat. I think there's a misconception out there that if you put a property in a family trust, it is safe from your spouse. So a lot of people have that in mind. It's not necessarily the case. So what the family court does is it looks at who's controlling the trust. So if the husband is the trustee of the trust, and the husband is also a beneficiary of the trust, and the husband bought the property in the name of the trust, then the court's going to say, look, we made it through that, and we're going to have that property as part of that trading pool of assets to be distributed fairly with the wife, or vice versa. One other reason why you need to be careful about family trusts is land tax. Now, government takes enough of our money as it is. You buy a property in a discretionary trust, you do not get the benefit of the land tax threshold. So there's an $850,000 land value that the government is at the moment saying is land tax free. So you can own one or two properties in your own name or in the name of your company and you don't pay any land tax. The moment you put it into a discretionary trust, they're going to ask you for land tax from dollar number one. So that might be an incentive enough to really think about how am I going to benefit from the property being in the family trust.
I don't feel bad, no one any questions for me, but that's fine. Guys, Anthony, Mealy, Harry, Bogassian, Zach, Constantino, congratulations and thank you very much for talking to us tonight. I think we're not selling you anything, and I'm really proud of that. But it's just really, really good advice. These guys are going to hang around a little bit. When we can, sorry. I will take it. And please feel free to hang around. The guys are going to be here for a while. Ask them personal questions. Have something to eat. If you can't tell, we love feeding people and giving people stuff to drink. So eat, drink, stay, ask, mix, go, whatever works well for you. But I also want to thank our media team for putting stuff together. A lot of this stuff is homegrown, and we'll get a bag tonight. Lisa, can you explain the bag? We've got no backups for the first time in 30 years. Hey. There you go. Come on. This is the way to put all this together tonight. Yeah, take the one. Thank you.
To engage us in managing their properties with our incredible property management team, our property management great team. And then we also put out a weekly magazine called Figures, which has every single one of our for sale listings, residential for sale, every single one of our rental properties. It's got live QR codes on there, so it's all
My favourite.
and our, of course, profit guide to real estate terms, what we do without it. That's not even everything. That's actually a handy review. So everyone will get one of these bags tonight. And enjoy. Thank you.
Lisa and the whole of the team here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. About come on this list. That's it. Hey. All right, everyone. Thank you.